And as we move through, you'll hear some of what I've already shared. So as kind of a little bit of a review, you will see some of my frames that I've already shared. And so I would kind of move quickly through them and quickly through some of the others as possible. It takes a lot of time to present what I've researched. I have so much in me, so much that I want to say. I spend so much time trying to get to the essence of what I believe I need to share. So it takes me a little time. And I want to say thank you to those of you who are patient with me. Patient with me. And let's begin. Building the house of Yahweh. Haggai chapter 1, verse 1 through 8. In the second year of Darius the sovereign, in the 6th month, on the first day of the month, the word of Yahweh came by Haggai, the prophet, to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Yehuda, and to Yehoshua, son of Yehoshadai, the high priest, saying, Thus spoke Yahweh of hosts, saying, This people have said, the time has not come. The time the house of Yahweh is to be built. Then the word of Yahweh came by Haggai, the prophet, saying, You have sown much, but brought in little. Eat, but do not have enough drink. But you are not full with drink. Clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. He who earns wages, earn wages, but put into a bag with holes. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, Consider your ways, go up to the mountain, and you shall bring wood and build the house, and I shall be pleased with it, and let me be esteemed, said Yahweh. And so right here, I'm pretty much in the beginning, and I'm going to continue going past and go to my part 2, because most of this you've already seen. Here we're looking at first the empire of Babylon, right here, the Persian Empire, then the Medes. This is Kyrgyzstan, which is the Medes and the Kurds, which you will recognize. This is the land of war today, also known as Assyria. Okay, this is where we're presently fighting a little war. Turkey on one side, Russia with Syria and Assad, and then you have the United States, who's on the side of the Kurds. Just kind of reminding you of some of the places that we've already gone. Remember, we talked about the man who was in, and I'll go back to that slide. Again, I'm going to move through these really quickly. Zechariah chapter 1, verses 8 through 10, and I looked at night and saw a man riding on a red horse, and he was standing among the myrtle trees in the shade. And behind him were horses, red, sorrel, and white. And I said, Master, what are these? And the messenger who was speaking to me said to me, let me show you what they are. And the man who stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, they are the ones Yahweh has sent to go throughout the earth. And again, moving quickly through, but in the final analysis, you'll know this as symbolic forms. We also see here, chapter 3, verse 1 through 5, we see Yehoshua, the high priest, who is also symbolic in form of Yeshua to come. And so if he was high priest at this time, this we'll see again, so I'm going to go past even this one. But if you see in red, it says, they are men of symbol, for look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch. See the stone which I have put before Yehoshua, on one Yahweh of hosts, on one stone are 7 eyes. See, I am engraving its inscription, declared Yahweh of hosts, and I shall remove the guilt of that land in one day. Fulfilled. 1948, when it was declared, the land of Israel declared a country once again after almost 2,000 years. 70 AD. Moving quickly past that, because I will explain that in more detail in just a moment. And so here, as I start, once again, looking at some scriptures to kind of bring forward some of the ideas that I've been sharing. And as I've been sharing well over 10 years, actually around 15 years or even maybe a little bit more. What I have been learning as I study what is called end time revelation or understanding. And so in this I am attempting to put, to summarize a lot of the things I've been sharing into one teaching. So Zechariah chapter 3 verse 8, listen now listen, Yehoshua the high priest, you and your companions, make note of that, not only you, also your companions, who sit before you, for they are men of symbol, for look, I am bringing forth my son the branch, and I shall appoint a place for my people Israel, and shall plant them, and they shall dwell in a place of their own, and no longer be afraid, neither shall the children of wickedness oppress them again, as at the first. Even from the days I appointed rulers over my people Israel, and have caused you to rest from all your enemies, and Yahweh has declared to you that he would make you a house. When your days are filled and you rest with your fathers, I shall raise up your seed after you, who comes from your inward parts, and shall establish his reign. Another major noteworthy part. He does build a house for my name, and I shall establish the throne of his reign forever. Hold on to that. I am to be his father, and he is my son. If he does perversely, I shall prove him with the rods of men and with the blows of the sons of men. Fulfilled. And I'll try to keep doing that as I remember, to say either fulfilled or to come. Sometimes it may be partially fulfilled. Here, we know that I am to be his father, he is my son. If he does perversely, I shall reprove him with the rod of men. That we know has been done. Yeshua, who is known as the son of Yahweh, and what I want you to remember is that the scripture says, he shall build, if you see the purple highlight, he does build a house for my name, and I shall establish the throne of his reign forever. So, the first time he came, but as a slain lamb. The forever part is what we're looking for now. We know and we can attest to he was crucified and he rose again. But it also says that he will build a house. So the first house that I want to relate to you that he was building, we know the temple in the earth, yes, but also he removed that one to make us a temple, because now he resides in us. And so this is where he always wanted to be, inside the hearts of Israel. But we know there was a temple that were built in the earth so that we can see how we must approach a living God, the only wise God. So looking forward, you're going to see several things where I am kind of building my platform on a timeline of which we will conclude with, and I have some information for you as well, so you can take notes, but I'm going to have someone pass these out. If I can get, I guess maybe Chris and Ephraim, Janae, if they can pass these out. One to a family until they run out. I have a few there. So just kind of, make sure that every table at least gets one, and a family gets one, and then you can go around for seconds as available. Now, this is my last slide that I'm giving to you now. So all of the numbers are all there that I'm going to be using. There's a couple of pieces that I will give you when we get there that is not there. And what you will be able to do, let me go ahead and just tell you now. Looking at that, looking at the firstborns, when you see the firstborn, that's the key I'm going to be using. Some years ago, I did a search. I did some research on the timeline, which is why you hear me when I speak about it. I speak pretty certain of what I understand. And again, I want to say, not everyone agree with me, and that's fine. This search that I'm giving you, the information that I gave you, not every researcher agrees with that. There's a lot of them out there. They do not all agree. But what I pulled in is what I agree with, what I searched out to be true, and I was able to just cut and paste so I didn't have to go through. What I've done in the past was try to do a graph myself, but actually before I got finished, there was another brother, Ray DeAndre, who was part of our group some years ago. He was doing the same search. He finished it up and gave me a copy of it, so I didn't really finish doing a graphic myself, although I did my material search. So what you have is basically a calendar. I had some other calendars that I was also going to show, but I'm going to skip past them if I still have them in here. But this should be sufficient. I wanted something that was very simple and very easy on the numbers. Now, with the numbers, all you need to do, if you want to go ahead and start your search, is do only the begotten numbers. Don't do what age the fathers died. Just do Seth, age 130, and keep going all the way down to Abraham. Abraham is the major key in what we need. All right, so by the time we get to that slide, you should have some numbers, okay? And I'll ask you then, what do you have? We'll verify. This way at least you can check it out. And I know already I will have to give you two pieces, but I'll explain that later on. All right, so continuing on, Revelation chapter 11, verse 1 through 4. We're going forward looking at the temple, and here is a witness to a 70-year period of time. And a reed like a measuring rod was given to me, and the messenger stood, saying, Rise and measure the dwelling place of Elohim, and the slaughter place, and those worshiping in it, but cast out the court which is outside the dwelling place, and do not measure it. For it has been given to the nations, and they shall trample the set apart place, or set apart city underfoot for 32 months. And it shall be unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. They are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that are standing before the Elohim of the earth. So what we're looking at here is, I believe, a 70-year period that will initiate, and I use that term loosely, but there are certain time frames that certain events take place. Because Yahweh didn't just start. He started a long time ago, really back in the garden. But there are certain time elements that are timeline events. So this is kind of what I'm looking at. And as I move forward, let's go to Zechariah chapter 13, verse 2. And it shall be in that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, that I cut off the names of the idols from the earth, and they shall be remembered no more. And I shall also remove the prophets and the unclean spirits from the earth. Now, right here, this is very important in trying to distinguish past time and future. Why? Because what he said here, I cut off the names of the idols from the earth. The question is, has that been done yet? Has that been completed yet? And the answer is no, because we still have pagan weeks, days of the week. Right. We have pagan months. We have pagan holidays. We have pagan people who observe pagan holidays. And if this sounds like you, for those of you who are watching by internet, here is what you can do. Return to the ways of Yahweh And his time, and I understand that this is something that each generation and each person must, they themselves, resolve what they believe, but this is not over yet. And he also says that I shall remove the prophets and unclean spirits. We know that the prophet liars, the prophets, those who prophet, want to profit from Yahweh's word, that has not been done away with yet. Matter of fact, you can open up the events of many churches who will send out flyers to say, come and hear the prophet. What they don't say is he's there for profit, with the IT instead of ET. And we're not talking about ET phone home either. But this is how we know it has not been accomplished yet. So the unclean spirits, also we know that they're still in the earth. Continuing. So here are some examples. I will continue to give examples of 70 and 7. And let me go ahead and put on the board. A couple of things that I definitely want us to remember. 400, 430. Can I have one of those other, let me see if I can, I want to get this, should be a black one over there. This is basically the timeline that I've been working on since I've started this search. 400 and 430 to understand the two different time periods, and also we're going to look at a 7-year period and a 70-year period. Each of these are very, very significant in the understanding of end-time prophecy. I say end-time prophecy because that's what is very common, that's what people know. But it's not end time, it's really the beginning. The end of the kingdom of man's reign. Yes, so I agree with that. But it's really the beginning of the kingdom of Yahweh and the presence in the earth. So I'll stick with that. So here are four timeline periods that I've been kind of really focusing on. So here we know that the Sabbath is the 7th day, and then there's a 7-year period, which is called the year of release, and then there's what's called the Shabuah. Shabuah is every 7 years till you get to a 70th year, and so it's a 7-year period of time, but then there's a 10 cycles of that 7th year, which is the Shemita year. And again, you've heard Shemita, which is the year of release. You've heard it over and over again in some teachings and some people who have said 2017, actually, was it 2017? But prior years, they call it the Shemitah year. 2011 was a Shemitah year. If you add 7 to that, what year would it be? 2018. So this year is a year, a Shemita year, or a year in the cycle of Shabuah, of release. Now, so can we say maybe it's not a year of release because Yahweh hasn't released us? You got to remember, there's many of these going by. You got even a Shabuah that has 10 of these periods, okay? So this is what my job is, to help rightly divide the word of truth, because his word is true. Whether we see it or not, whether we see a year of release or not, his word is true. But there is a particular time that in that timeline, he will deliver his people. So, Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3, 6 days work is done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, a set-apart gathering. You do no work. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwellings. So every seventh year is called the year of release, or a Shemitah. Zechariah chapter 3, verse 9. See the stone which I have put before Yehoshua. On one stone are 7 eyes. Something I'm working on, but when I was looking at this again today, my thought was, maybe this is, and I do have it here, maybe this is the 7 spirits of Yahweh as the stone. So I related that, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, and a rod shall come forth from the stump of Yeshai, and a sprout from the root shall be fruitful. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, and the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. These are 7 spirits, and I have them so that you may count them: Yahweh, wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, and fear. So I looked at this and I said, can this be related to the 7 stones, or the stones that have 7 eyes, being the Spirit of Yahweh? I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. That was something that I was questioning. But anyway, here is a theme. And so what I'm showing you today is the theme of 7 and 70. Showing you a pattern that I think, as I conclude, will give you my conclusion that I believe. So as we continue, let's look at something else. Here is, and I think Rabish showed this, the days of the week. Yes, days of the week, the Hebrew. Okay, so, and I'm going to just run past this really. Rishon, Shemni, Shini, Shali, Revi, Kamashi, and Shai, Shi, and of course one that we are familiar with is the Shabbat, or the Sabbath. So 7 days of the week, they relate to first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, and seventh day. And so, of course, as they relate to us here in Babylon, or Egypt, whichever one you prefer, these are the 7 days of the week in the Hebrew, as opposed to the pagan days that we observe. And again, here are the 12 months and their secular dates. So the Hebrew names, and I have them numbered. The first month is called Nisan. second year. It's also called, and you'll see some scripture that give the second month a different name, which is Z-I-W. So Ziv or Ziv. So some of these, to explain, some of these Hebrew modern day names are pagan as well. If you see Tammuz, we know right off that's pagan. So coming back from Babylon, coming back from Egypt, coming out of Egypt, they carried along with them traditions, things they understood, things they knew. No different from what we are and where we are today. We know January, February, March, April, and so on. But what we didn't know is that they were all pagan months. And so Yahweh has not removed these from our tongue yet. This is what we live in. This is what we understand. But there is a change taking place in us. Little by little, we're getting used to calling different months and knowing when they come, when we see them in teachings or in the scriptures, because each of these, some of these, we can, well, most of the months we can find in the scriptures. That's one of the things that I have done in the past, is just put in months and started compiling all of the Hebrew months, just for my own, to begin to understand scriptural months and what month they were. Because what I'm doing is showing you a relationship between time past and time present. So Nisan, Lir, Sivan, Tammuz, Menachem, Av, Elul, Tishri, and Marchevet, Keslev, Tevet, Shevet, and Adar. And then there's one that's not there, which is called, in the year of a leap year, they call it Adar 1, Adar 2, whenever we have to do a 13th month. And that's according to the sign of heaven that the year has not completed yet. But anyway, since I'm not really on the months, I want to just kind of roll on through. You see the correlating holy days that also on the right-hand side that deal with them. So here's the 7th month, or 7th year, excuse me. In the 7th year, the temple was completed by Solomon. Hebrew name, Shlomo. 1 Kings chapter 6 is where I get that information. And it reads, and it came to be in the 480th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mizraim, in the 4th year of the reign of Shlomo over Israel, the reign of Shlomo over Israel in the new moon of Sivar, Zav. Sometimes the W is also a V or a B sound, which is, and the word of Yahweh came to Shlomo, saying, this house which you are building, if you walk in my laws and do my right rulings, and shall guard all my commands and walk in them, then I shall confirm my word with you, which I spoke to your father David, and shall dwell in the midst of the children of Israel, and not forsake my people Israel. So Shlomo built the house and completed it. In the 4th year, the foundation of the house of Yahweh was laid in the month of Zav. And in the 11th year, in the month Bul, the 8th new moon, the house was completed in all its matters according to all its plans. Thus he built it for 7 years. So it took Shlomo 7 years to complete the building. He started on the foundation in his 4th year of his reign. Now, here's some quick numbers. King David reigned for 40 years, going backwards again. King Shaul, Paul, he reigned for 40 years. Right there is 80 years. And so in the 4th year of Shlomo's reign, he began to build the temple. And it took him 7 years to do so. Again, I want you to keep in mind, there are patterns that I want you to consider. 70 or 7. You're going to see this continual pattern. That was the first temple. The first temple was built by who? Question. The first temple was built by Shlomo. And I'll ask that same question again. The first building was built by who? Shlomo. We know him today, or you will read him in King James as Solomon. I'm doing this for a reason, because I'm trying to push you to track some things, patterns, and to connect them with generations and name. Okay? So as we do this, I'm going to be dragging you through, because numbers, they can be a little difficult when you're teaching numbers, because they begin to blur a little bit. But I'm now connecting them to names and generations. So if that was the first temple, now let's look at the second temple, and you will see there's a second name that is assigned to it, giving us a different, way different generation. And also remember the amount of time that has passed. It said 480 years. Let me go back to that so I can point it out while you're looking at it. 480 years after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mizraim, in the 4th year of the reign of Shlomo over Israel. So he's given us the year and the month. Okay? Don't worry about having to keep up with everything in your mind. I'm doing it for you, and I'm dragging you along. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that there is a very specific year that they came out of Mizraim. And I'll go ahead and give that year once again to you. But as I move through, I'm going to be reconciling the numbers, which is 2,448. They came out of Mizraim 2,448 from the year of Adam. And what you already have in front of you are the years of Begat. And so as you tabulate or calculate those numbers, you will also be able to verify yourself what year they came out of Mizraim. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 8 through 14, and we're looking at the second temple. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel and have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands shall complete it. And you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. For who has despised the days of small beginnings? For they shall rejoice when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. These 7 are the eyes of Yahweh, which diligently search throughout all the earth. Then I responded and said to him, what are these 2 olive trees, one at the right of the lampstand and the other at its left? And I responded a second time and said to him, what are these 2 olive branches which empty golden oil from themselves by means of the 2 gold pipes? And he answered me and said, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my master. And he said, these are the 2 anointed ones who stand beside the master of all the earth. And so, as I have said in time past, I'll go ahead and say now that these 2 anointed ones have names. I've already done the research. These are the 2 prophets that Yahweh said would return to the earth. Elijah, Eliyahu, and Enoch. These 2, from my own research, is who I understand to be the 2 olive branches. And it says, these are the 2 anointed ones who stand beside the master of all the earth, which means they were in heaven and awaited their time. The significant thing that I think for these 2 is the 70-year period. I believe that this is the year that they will complete their task, meaning we'll read a little later where they have 12,060 days, 1,260 days to prophesy in the earth, to bring down rain, to bring earthquakes, things that are just abnormal. And I think we've been seeing some things that were abnormal. In the earth, judgment. And I believe that these 2 prophets have already been implanted in the earth. And I believe they are drawing to a close their task. I believe the 70th year will complete their task. Let's look at Ezra chapter 7, verses 6 through 9. And what I want you to really, which is why I put it into a little summary up top, is to summarize what I'm trying to give you. Everything I'm telling you right now is in those 2 lines. But I'm going to give you the details. You would call this supporting details. All right, so they're leaving Babylon on the first day of the first month. The first month is, in the Hebrew calendar, is Nisan. You'll see the scripture talk about the month of the Aviv. That's the event, not the month. So as we're learning to understand Yahweh's talk, his language, I'm going to go back to church for a quick second. They would say in the church, you got to get in the mindset of Yahweh. So right here, you got to begin to understand his language, how he talks. Okay? So when you read in the month of the Aviv, it's the month of the action or the event of the greenery, which he spoke all the way back in creation. Remember, on the 3rd day, he said, let every flower, greenery of its kind recede after its own kind, right? So that's what we're talking about. That has to take place, which is why if you have to go into a 13th month, if you don't see this taking place where the barley is in the shoot and ready to be harvested in 2 weeks' time, there's a test you have to do. You have to go into the field and test and squeeze the barley as it's in its green shoot, and there should be a white milky substance that comes out. But of course, this is in the land. So what do you do when you're not in the land? You got to rely on all the technology you have. So we use technology and those who are in the land. So we check everything. We count months. We look at the stars. We look at the moons. We look at the full moons. Right here we do all of that. We just don't get to travel over to the land. But one day, hallelujah. So this Ezra came up from Babylon, and he was a scribe skilled in the Torah of Moshe, which Yahweh Elohim of Yisrael had given him. And the sovereign gave him all he asked, according to the hand of Yahweh, his Elohim, upon him. And some of the children of Yisrael, and the priests, and the Levites, and the singers, and the gatekeepers, and Netanyim came up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of the sovereign of Artashata. And he came to Jerusalem in the 5th new moon, which was in the 7th year of the sovereign, for on the 1st day of the 1st new moon month, he began to go up from Babylon, and on the 1st day of the 5th new moon, he came to Jerusalem, according to the good hand of his Elohim upon him. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the Torah of Yahweh, and to do it, and to teach laws and right rulings in Yisrael. That last part is so important, because look right here where it says, and to teach laws and right rulings, where? In the land of Yisrael. So that begs the question, Ezra, he was born in Babylon, never saw the land of Israel. I remember they were there for how long? 70 years, right? So he was born in the land. Who else? Zerubbabel, who was king or governor. He too was born in Babylon, in captivity, in exile. Guess what we have in common with them? Born in the land of our captivity. So you think I want to leave here without Yahweh saying, let's go? So all these people talking about it, you don't like it here, why don't you leave? Yeah, you and who army? Because I got one greater than you. Yahweh, when he says, time to go, that's when I'm leaving, and not before. So, look how specific he is. So going to build the second temple, now we can distinguish them, 2 different generations, right? This one is known by Ezra and Zerubbabel. Really, they would say the temple of Zerubbabel is known as. But we see who are the priests. And did they learn the Torah when they got back? No. Where they learned the Torah was before they got back. They studied, they learned, and they were ready by the time they got back. His heart, and I'm going back to that last part, for Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the Torah of Yahweh and to do it, and to teach laws and right rulings in the land of Yisrael. So what you think we've been doing here? All those late nights. Every time we get together, we are here for some time. Why? We're getting our hearts ready. We're filling it with the Torah. We're not waiting till we get in the land. But when we get in the land, we're going to teach the Torah. To who? To everyone.
That's right.
And in that day, all nations shall flow unto the mountain of Yisrael, the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of Yahweh. Yeah. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2. Also, I just also want to really cue in on how long did it take them to get back? 5 months. Let's see. So we can see it was the priests, the Levites, and the singers that were going back, gatekeepers, and it has a cross-reference to the 7th year of a king. So here's a roadmap through secular and biblical history. You can take the two and cross-reference who was king, what land, how many years, what year, certain things, and these are the type things that I do when I'm doing my research. All right, so, and he came to Jerusalem, last bullet, in the 5th new moon, which was the 7th year of the sovereign. For on the first day of the new moon, he began to go out of Babylon. Look how specific Yahweh is being. And they came into the land on the 5th new moon in Jerusalem. And when the 7th month came, the children of Israel, Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 1 through 8, and when the 7th month came, the children of Israel were in their cities. And all the peoples gathered together as one man in the open space that was in front of the water gate. And they spoke to Ezra, the scribe, to bring the book of the Torah of Moshe, which Yahweh had commanded Israel. And Ezra, the priest, brought the Torah before the assembly of both men and women and all who could hear with understanding. On the first day of the 7th month, your mind should be clicking, and he read from it in the open space in front of the water gate from morning until midday. Another noteworthy, before the men and women and those who could hear or understand, and the ears of all the people listened to the book of the Torah. And Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above all the people. And when he opened it, all the people stood up, and Ezra blessed Yahweh, the great Elohim. Then all the people answered, Amen, Amen, while lifting up their hands. And they bowed their heads and worshiped Yahweh with faces to the ground. And they read in the book of the Torah of Elohim, translating to give sense and causing them to understand the reading. Is this not what we do every Shabbat? We stand at the reading of the Torah. And we've also been lately going into a song to usher us in to the word of Yahweh. This is what they were doing. But look how they midrash from morning until midday. Now, let me explain morning to midday. That could be as long as 6 hours or more during this period of time. That's just reading the Torah. And then after they read it, then they midrash, helping them to understand. Because what I don't have up there is other Torah teachers were also by his side, standing with him. And they went out among Israel after they finished reading by midday, and they midrash with the people. That should sound familiar right here, because we definitely midrash to help bring understanding to the Torah. And so look at the pattern. The 7th month, on the first day of the 7th month. We know the 7th month is when we celebrate what? Sukkot, right? As we celebrate Sukkot, we have Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, right? So we can see the pattern. On the first day of the 7th month, Day of Trumpets. Look how specific Yahweh is being with us. And so when that day comes, we are right out here in the parking lot, and we're looking for the first day. The sign in heaven to know, okay, it's the first day. And so this is what we do to verify that we are on track, rather than going with our best of our ability understanding. But a sign where? In the heavens. And Yahweh shows the sign in the heavens. Haggai chapter 2, verse 1 through 5. And also the last one, the last bullet will be verse 9. In the 7th month, on the 21st day of the month, the word of Yahweh came by Haggai, the prophet, saying, "Speak please to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Yehuda, Judah, and to Yehoshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and to the remnant of the people, saying, Who is left among you who saw this house in its former esteem? And how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes as naught when compared to it? And now, be strong, Zerubbabel, declares Yahweh. Be strong, Yehoshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and be strong, all you people of the land, declares Yahweh, and work. For I am with you, declares Yahweh of hosts, the word that I covenanted with you when you came out of Mizraim, and my spirit is remaining in your midst. Do not fear. Let the esteem of this latter house be greater than the former, said Yahweh of hosts, and in this place I give peace, declared Yahweh of hosts. So here, Yahweh lets us know that there's a space of time that the temple wasn't complete under Zerubbabel. We've already read that one where it says, the foundation of this house was by the hand of Zerubbabel. And by the hand of Zerubbabel, it shall be completed. So the first thing I want you to recognize is that that's two different temples, without a doubt. Two totally different timelines. One, after they came out of Mizraim, 480 years to be exact. Yahweh gives us exact numbers. In the 4th year, of the reign of Shlomo. So 2 kings had already reigned, and now the 3rd son is in reign as king. But in his 4th year, the foundation was laid by Shlomo. Now we're in the time of Babylon and coming back. 70th year when they came back. But they started to build a temple, and there were other cultures that came in and interfered. First, they wanted to help build, and Zerubbabel and Ezra denied them and said, nope, it cannot be by your hand. It must be by our hand. This is why Yahweh sent us back. By Israel and no government. And so they set up traps, and they came in and destroyed work, and so there was a space of time. And so Yahweh complained about it and said, you go home to your own homes, and mine is not complete. So I just wanted to show you that there was a space of time, and Yahweh says, build it, and my spirit will remain in your midst. Don't fear. I know they're messing with you. I'm going to give you a space of time. But you know what? As I look at things like this, sometimes Yahweh is creating certain space of time for patterns, if you understand what I'm saying, to create certain patterns that he wants to occur in that space of time. All right, so let's continue. Here is another sign of time, and now we're looking at both past and future. Matthew chapter 24, verse 33 and 34. So you also, when you see all these, know that he is near at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation by no means pass away until all this take place. This is very special. Very special, because we're dealing with a space of time that either is correct or must be replayed. And what I mean is, I see a 70-year period of time of which we cannot say with certain, I'm trying to be careful of how I say this. I cannot in myself say, this is it. No mistakes about it, because Yahweh is sovereign. Whatever he says goes. He can choose another time period, and this only look like it, giving us hope in our time and in our generation. So we need to explain what a generation is. Let's go to Psalms 90, verse 10. The days of our lives are 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. Yet the best of them is but toil and exertion. For it is soon cut off, and we fly away. So here's a generation. We are completing a generation this year. And if Matthew 24, verse 33 and 34 is applied, then this generation shall not be completed without all being done. So here's a 70-year, and I'll throw in a 10-year grace period, but a 70-year period of time that I think we need to pay attention. I think we have to consider it and not say Yahweh is not coming back. I mean, that's what the Pope would like to say, and that's what he has said. Yeshua is not coming back, so we no longer will wait. We're going to wait. So we're looking at the patterns, and that's what I'm really trying to impress upon you. When I teach about end-time events or prophecy, I'm really trying to be very careful that I'm not trying to say from myself that this is how it's going to be. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. But giving, and in myself, when I say things like, if you'll accept this, then here is a possibility of consideration we must consider. When I say things like that, what I'm doing is giving you a door to say, okay, here's a possibility that we need to look at, or maybe it's not really this time, maybe it's another generation or another time. I'm not trying to press anyone to believe what I believe, but let me be straight with you. When I do that, I really believe that this is the time. So when I say I believe we are in the right time frame, it's because of all of my research and things that I see, the signs of heaven and the signs in the earth, that I really believe we are in the right time frame. Continuing. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 10 and 11. For thus saith Yahweh, when 70 years are completed at Babel, I shall visit you and establish my good word toward you, to bring you back to this place, for I know the plans I am planning for you, declares Yahweh, plans of peace. We haven't got to the place of peace yet. And not of evil, to give you a future and an expectancy. That's where I'm at. Expectancy is just that. The expectancy, it says, this is what my hope is. This is what I expect. So I expect certain things to occur, certain events. And so I'm sharing with you what I expect or my hope. Revelation chapter 14, verse 7 and 8. Saying with a loud voice, fear Elohim and give esteem to him, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made the heaven and the earth, and sea, and foundations of water. And another messenger followed, saying, Babel is falling, that great city, because she has made a nation drink of the wine of the wrath of her whoring. And so we know that Revelation points to future events. And so again, we have a generation that it points to, and it speaks concerning Jeremiah speaks concerning Babylon, which is what Daniel saw and spoke to the king. They released them to return back to Jerusalem, for them to both repair the wall and build the temple. Here's another witness to the 70-year period. Jeremiah, actually 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21 only. In order to fill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbath, as long as she lay waste, she kept Sabbath, until 70 years were completed. So in other words, here's another witness that 70 years the land would be restored with her people. Why? Because they perverted the Sabbath. So that's why it took 70 years. And Yahweh knew that even well ahead of time. Because, and I don't have it on here, but I'll give it to you. Ezekiel, another prophet, chapter 4, verse 4, explains, and he doesn't tell you what's going on. It's just the numbers that I use to help me understand. He tells him to lay on his left side for 390 days for Yisrael. And then on his right side for 40 days for Yehuda. And he says, and I myself shall put on you the amount of time, a day for a year, a day for a year. So here is what I found, is there is a 30-year deficit that was paid up front because they stayed in Babylon for 70 years, as we keep reading, and not 40 years. So just when you're ready, I want you to verify how long were they supposed to be in Babylon. Now, when you read it, you're going to read 40. Here's how you get to that 70. You look at these, you look at that 40, a day for a year. It's supposed to be 40 years. So they stayed 30 years too long. And so I believe that that has all to do with the timeline we're dealing with. And I'll get to that a little later. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 1 through 7. And these are the words Yahweh spoke concerning Israel and Yehuda. Notice that that's both the southern and northern kingdom. Israel, northern, Yehuda, southern. Oh, for great is that day. There is none like it. And it is the time of Yaakov's distress. And right there, he just switched beyond Babylon, the physical Babylon. He went to the spiritual, but yes, also physical. And I'll explain that in a second. There is none like it. And it is the time of Yaakov's distress, the time of Jacob's troubles. But he shall be saved out of it. So right there is Yahweh's word. He shall be saved out of it. And it shall be that in that day, remember, whenever it says in that day, it's not talking about a day as in one day, but a time element, a time period. There's events that will happen in that day. There is none like it, and it is the time of Yaakov's distress, but he shall be saved out of it. And it shall be in that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, that I break his yoke from your neck and tear off your bonds. And foreigners, look at this, no more enslave them. And they shall serve their Elohim and David, their sovereign, whom I raise up for them. And you do not fear, O Yaakov, my servant, declares Yahweh, nor be discouraged, O Yisrael, both parts, north and south. For look, I am saving you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. Major. And Yaakov shall return and have rest and be at ease with no one to trouble him. That's an oath. That's a promise. That Yahweh says he's going to take Israel from the land of their captivity. Guess where we are? In the land of our captivity. So we see both the natural and the spiritual. Yes, we are the spiritual temple, but we're also the spiritual in spiritual Babylon. Let me say it correctly. Mystery Babylon, so says the scripture. And he says, I'm saving you from afar and your seed. And there's no doubt about this in my mind, because it says, and they shall serve Yahweh, their Elohim, Yahweh, and David, their sovereign. Well, let's examine this. When they came back from Babylon, had David, trying to say it correctly, Was David alive when they came back from Babylon? David was the second king. So he was expired a long time. He was the second king, right? And so we know that even coming out of Egypt, 480 years had passed when they built the first temple. So look at that in conjunction to Solomon in his 4th year of reign, right? I'm trying to draw the picture for you, the time elements. And so David had reigned over them for 40 years, right? So just comparing the timeline as I'm moving through, so you can see David is no longer in the picture, but he says here that you will serve Yahweh and their king David, their sovereign. And I just want to give that to you, which you already know, because I know you're Talmudim, that that's Yeshua. And so we will be saved, as the scripture says, from afar. Guess where we are? Afar. Babylon is falling. I want to show you 3 Babylons. The first one was called the Tower of Babylon, under the king and sovereign Nimrod. The second one was Babylon, under the king and sovereign Nebuchadnezzar, who was the head of gold. And now there is a third Babylon, which Revelation calls it Mystery Babylon, or, yes, Mystery Babylon. So I have three different Babylons and 4 witnesses here. Genesis chapter 11, verse 9. That is why it was called Babel, because there Yahweh confused the language of all the earth, and from there Yahweh scattered them over the face of all the earth. Now we know that that happened. There's a major event that also took place. The language of all the earth was changed. There was only one language. So how would we know that this has been reversed when Israel have been given their language back, along with their own land? I want to drive that point home. We will be given our own land and our own language. Because right now, we speak the language of the king. Right now, we speak the language of our captors. Right now, we speak the language of Mystery Babylon. Isaiah chapter 21, verse 9, and see this, a chariot of men coming with a pair of horsemen, and he spoke up and said, Babel is fallen, and all the carved images of her mighty ones he has broken to the ground. Revelation chapter 14, verse 8, and another messenger followed saying, Babel is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of her wrath, of her whoring. Chapter 18, verse 2. And he cried with a mighty voice, saying, Babel the great is falling, and has become a dwelling place of demons, and a haunt for every unclean spirit, and a hunt for every unclean and hated bird. So right here, why is it that Yahweh keep reminding us that Babel is falling? It's a process. It's not a past tense and over with. It's a process that has happened and is happening. But there's coming a time when we will say it has happened. when the messengers of heaven, matter of fact, it's called the fourth trumpet, when the bird flies in the midst of the heaven and says, Babel is falling, it's falling. The deliverance of Yahweh has happened. And so when the announcement goes over the earth, not that, we are hearing. First of all, it says there's an eagle that's flying and announcing the deliverance of Israel. So Yahweh is taking control. But it will happen. It's the fourth trumpet. And I believe we are seeing it take place, but not in totality. I think there's still some elements that are to come. But look at the theme, Babel is falling. When did it fall? It fell, and in the 70th year, they came back. But after the 70th year, they actually fell to the Medes and Persia. And so, looking ahead, once again, I want to just take a look at, this is a map of Africa. And what you're looking at is, first of all, up top, I have the link to where I pulled this from. And it is the independence dates of the continent of Africa. Africa has 53, and I've heard 54, but whichever one it is, nations, independent nations that were enslaved. So we've always looked at, us here in America as, being enslaved. Then we found out South America was enslaved too. But the whole continent of Africa was enslaved. There's only two nations that did not go into slavery because they fought against the different independent armies that came in. And so what we have is, and I guess if I need the plug, the map that we were looking at has all of the countries that became free. And it was, I think the latest one that I saw was 1994. I went throughout the map and searched, and I think if I didn't miss anything, 1994 was the last country of Africa, that is, to be declared independent from the European nations. I will show you an image of the European nations that enslaved us along with Africa itself. And so with Africa itself being enslaved, each of the nations such as Germany, London or Britain, Spain, and several of the European nations, you can find this in the history where they had a meeting in Germany and they divvied up the continent of Africa. And when they divvied up the country, they didn't take consideration that there were people already there. They just went in and said, this is my land, and they took the land. They had weaponry that was far advanced. They were able to use guns, and I think they also came into some bombs and stuff like that. So they were able to really pursue their enemy and take over the land. Now, with that said, when I get back to the images, we're going to look at Europe and their sphere of influence. We'll look at what did they influence or take over in the world. And so as I'm trying to reconcile the time, again, 400 years is still outstanding. 430 years has already elapsed. This is coming out of Egypt. The pattern that I want you to keep up with, Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3, the seventh day, Sabbath, and all of the holy days, and then a time period of 70 years, of which I believe we are in and getting ready to conclude as of the year 2018. Now, these nations have been partially controlled or under European influence. So far, that's the major part of the world. Well, look at the yellow. This too is where the European influence had also thrived. There's only a few places in the little orange tint never colonized by Europe. But look at Africa. You see one little small piece that were not colonized by Europe. And there's actually another piece up here which would be and I know I'm drawing a blank here, but children, they're known by two names. People call them Solomon, Ethiopia. Thank you. Solomon, they were never colonized. They had a great army that were able to fight and stay or remain free. I have a suspicion, I have a feeling that through that culture, the Messiah came back in to the nations. They were the only people under their sovereignty who had a continuous kingship or sovereignty for 200, and I think it was 255 generations straight. And I know I'm off on the year a little bit, but 255 generations, they had kings that were only from the bloodline of Solomon. And so through the bloodline of the Queen of Sheba and Solomon, who had an heir, there was a bloodline who were all the way to 1974 when that king was then overthrown by the army. But up to that point, to this very generation, it was never without a king. And I have a feeling that may have been another door for our Mashiach. So what are we really talking about? We're looking at a timeline of prophecies or a timeline of empires. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greeks, Rome, and now Europe. I agree with Europe being the nation or the legs that continue into the feet. The legs of iron and the feet that have mixed with clay. The stone shall come out and hit the legs and topple the statue. The statue is a timeline. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and now today, Europe. So let's go back and now conclude with some timelines. And here is where your timeline, I will ask a question and see if anybody was able to come up with some, some timeline. I know that you're gonna find at least a couple of mistakes. Some of you may find it, and some may not. You may go ahead all the way to the right timeline. But I do have the answer for that, but I'll reveal that in a few minutes. All right, so what do we have? We have the Assyrian captivity, which we know as 722 BC or before Common Era. So this is on prior side to Yeshua coming. So the numbers are going down. Why they choose to start at 4,000, I don't know. But they're confusing the time. But I'm using what they gave us, and we're relating to them. And so then the southern kingdom went into Babylonian captivity, 586. And Yahweh said 70 years. So that would take us to the year 516. Yehuda returns. Daniel, he did not come back. Again, I believe the reason that Daniel didn't come back is because he himself was defiled. Remember, he was made a what? Eunuch in the land of Babylon. So I believe that is the reason that he did not come back, because the reason they came back was to build the wall and the temple, right? He couldn't do that. Even though he was from the kingdom of Yehuda, he could not come back to do that. So we're looking at a 4,000-year history of world history. That's what I've been working on. And so we already have the Syrian captivity. Let's continue. So what I see as the time coming out of Egypt is the year 2448. This is when I believe they came out of Misraim. That is the two time periods that we are working on, which is 430 years, that's Egypt, Misraim, and 400 years. Combined together, that's a time period of 830. So, they went into, or came into, or we came into the land of the American captivity in 1619, Jamestown, Virginia. And so what I did here is I took the year 2018, using the year 70-year period from now time, present time, when the land was restored and called Israel. Because 70 AD is when Israel was destroyed for the second time by fire, fulfilling the scripture, purified. So in 1948, the land was restored. So my question is here. Abraham was also born in the year 1948. Now going back from Adam to Abraham. And I'll tell you why this is very important as we come to it. So, In 1865, the enslavement in this country ended by war. Documented 1865, but there was a civil war fought in this country. The southern nations wanted to keep their way of life. That means to keep us as slaves. But Yahweh took us out of slavery and what man calls as emancipation. April 9th, 1865. And so as I began to search these things out and look at them, the significance, once again, very significant to the time and date. Yahweh gave us other times and dates that were very significant. We're looking at it once again. In the first month of the Hebrew calendar, 14th day, Passover. And so here is a sign of the fish that I was able to bring out of that. It has now been, and you can actually go back to 1865, you can put in 2018, take away 1865, and it has now been 153 years as of Passover, this coming Passover, this year. So this will be a year of release. Will we go home this year? I don't know. We got to wait and see. But we have to consider it. We have to look at everything. But it is biblically the year of release. Now, please don't make a mistake and say, Rabbi said we're going home this year. I didn't say that. I want to be absolutely correct. Events will start to happen. We're going to record certain events. These events will be read long time from now from your generations. But guess what you're going to be able to say? I was there. Because you're going to pass it to your children, and your children's children will pass it along and say, my mother was there, my father was there. They were a part of this return. So history is going to record you. So we can't rush Yahweh alone. We can't rush him. He's going to do what he's going to do in its time. So let's continue. So that 153-year period of time, I saw right away as the sign of the fish. They were out in the water after Yeshua was crucified, and they were fishing, and it took 2 boats to bring in all of the fish after they had went out and fished all night and couldn't bring in anything. And then Yeshua spoke to them and told them to put the net on the right hand side, and so they did. They went back out as he instructed them. They brought in 153 big fish. It says, Hollywood says, well, no, big fish. Big fish, right? So that would be, they would be known as the sign of the fish. So here is another sign that we are looking at as of this year, which is 2018. There's a sign. No matter what happens this year, that sign is what it is. That's a sign that carries this year and will be documented for history's sake. Now, so if we look at 1865, Passover, emancipation, and the year they say we came to this land, 1619, I came up with 246 years since that time has passed. And as you can see, 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 plus 6. And I'm using all the numbers to look at them. 6 plus 6 equals 12. Signs. symbols. Remember, we already read. These men are symbols, signs and symbols. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for signs. I'm looking for symbols. We can keep going. 1 + 2 = 3. Redemption. Yeshua rose on what day? The third day, right? A lot of signs and symbols. So I went out, and also I didn't want to just take my own research, but I went out to see what are other people saying, what is the today's so-called Hebrew community, what do they have recorded? So I went to Chabad.org to find who had something that would agree with what I had. Now, again, I'm going to tell you straight up front that not every search I had the same year. Not every people, not every culture had the same years. There were some people that was way off and had numbers crazy. But anyway, this is what I trust. So I'll give it to you once again. The children of Israel was liberated from the yoke of their oppressor on the 15th day of Nisan in the year 2448 after the creation of the world. They further noted that Abraham, who was first called Abram, was born in the year 1948 after creation. According to one tradition, he was born in the month of Nisan. So this is not only my witness, but the so-called Jewish community and what they have, because remember, they have a lot of documents that we don't have. They have a lot of information. They have the scrolls. They have other things that were found, documents, history, okay? So this agrees with the timeline that I have been able to find. Now, what I want to do is, and I'm coming in, this is my last frame, I want to ask you, what did you come up with? And you can shout it out in just a second, but I'm going to give you 2 pieces that I have up top that I don't think you have. There's 2 things that I've known for years and how I was able to complete my chart or come up with the correct timeline. Genesis chapter 12 talks about Abraham and Yahweh giving him a promise of land inheritance before he even had children. Then he also gave him a promise and an oath that he would become father of many nations. So he went into a circumcision. He had a circumcision at the age of 100. But at the age of 75, he told him to leave from his father. But there's something very particular before he left his father that we have to look at and get a time element. I'll give that in a second. The book of Yasher agrees with it, and this is actually where I found it. Because once I got here, I had a small discrepancy. It was actually a 5-year discrepancy. And when you're dealing with numbers, just numbers, you know you got to find it. You have to find it. You can't just say, well, you know, it's close enough. No, you got to find exact numbers. So for those of you who work with numbers, you know, this, I had to keep searching until I found the information. And really, I just found this, I think a couple of weeks ago it was, a couple of weeks back, this part. And I was so happy because I knew that it was missing. But I knew what I understood to be the timeline. And I used the 75th year until I went back and did these numbers once again. Once I did the numbers, I'm like, there's a 5-year discrepancy. While I'm at it, there's another 2-year discrepancy. That's why I have both of these up here. And where I found the first one, so I'll just go ahead and give it to you, was in 2 major events. One was after the flood with a birth. I'll give that to you in a minute. You have to add 2 years to a birth of Shem's son, Apakshad. The scripture gives us his birth at the time when he was born, Shem's age, and then his age when he had his firstborn, but it doesn't give us the time of Apakshad when it does. And that's where I had to reconcile. I had to go back to the scriptures to get Apakshad's birth when it says, and he was born 2 years after the flood. That little piece right there is very significant. Okay, so that's one. And then the 5-year period is when Yahweh said to Abraham, a land inheritance. And I want to read that part for you, which is in the book of Yasher, and it's really in the scriptures as well, but he doesn't give us the number. He gives us the wordage, but not the number. And so here it is. The book of Yasher, chapter 13, starting at verse 17. And it was in the 5th year, or 15th year, of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 70th year of the life of Abraham, or Abram, and Yahweh appeared to Abram in that year, and he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you out of the land of Ur from Kasdim, to give thee this land for an inheritance. Now, therefore, walk before me and be perfect and keep my commands. For to you and to your seed I will give this land for an inheritance, from the river Misraim unto the great river Euphrates. And you shall come to your fathers in peace and in good age, and the 4th generation shall return here, and this land, and shall inherit it forever. And Abram built an altar, and he called upon the name of Yahweh, who appeared to him, and brought him up, and he brought up sacrifices upon the altar to Yahweh. At the time Abram returned and went to Haran to see his father, this is key here, and mother, and his father's household, and Abram and his wife, and all belonging to him, returned to Haran. And Abram dwelt in Haran 5 years. That's the discrepancy. And so Abraham was in Canaan for a second time, and we see Yahweh says to him, leave the land of your fathers. When we see that, when we read that, that's the 75th year, which is also spoken of in Genesis chapter 11, or chapter 12, I'm sorry. All right, so let's go ahead and see what you have come up with, and I'll explain it for the camera once again. In order to come up with this number of years, what I did is started with Adam and counted for 20 generations. Adam 10 generations, then Noah, and then from Shem to Abraham, another 10 generations. So 20 generations I used to reconcile the number of years to when they came out of Egypt. And here it is. Adam, when he had his firstborn, which is Seth, at age 130. Seth at age 105, Enosh, 90, 70, 65, 162, 65, 187, 182, and then Noah. And we should be familiar with how old Noah was when Yahweh told him there would be a flood. He was actually 600 years old. But what they're giving us is how old he was when his firstborn. So that could be a little tricky there. So that's why I'm giving it to you. His firstborn was born when 100 years back. He was 100 years old. Now I'm at Shem. He was 100 years old when the flood happened. But it doesn't tell us how old he was when Apakshad was born. It says 100. That's really when the flood happened. But here's the key. The scripture says, and Apakshad was born 2 years after the flood. That's where I had to go to get that. Because if you just read this, it says his firstborn was at age 100. Incorrect. And they're not the only ones that had this mistake. I went ahead and used it because I can, you know, I go ahead and give it to you. But, and so all the way to Abraham. And so using only the ages of their begats plus the other two that I reconciled, I came up with the year 2448. Now, if you have something different, that's okay. That's okay. This is not an easy task. So let me hear some numbers you may have come up with, even if you know that there's mistakes there. It's ongoing. I've done this years ago, and I'm still finding information. So somebody just raise your hand and go ahead and shout it out so that somebody know that you're shouting, and so everyone don't speak at the same time. Let me hear some numbers. Anyone have any numbers that you may have come up with from Adam to the Exodus of Egypt? This is what we're looking at. The Exodus of Egypt. Anyone come up with anything as of yet? And if you have, that's okay. You can still work on it. All right, so I'll move on. If you come up with something, I'll entertain it. But I just wanted to show you that, yes.
What did you say you had?
2,448.
You got 2,446.
That's what I knew. I was expecting that number. And again, that's the reason you have to, the 2 years, you can't go with Shem being 100 at his firstborn. It looks like that. But what it says, Shem was 100 years old at the time of the flood. Right behind that, it says, and Shem, his firstborn, was when he was 2 years after the flood. It doesn't give a number. It says 2 years after the flood. So if you add that 2 year onto that, then you have 2,448, and we've come up with the same number. Anybody else? All right, good, good. All right, so why did I do that? I wanted to show you that it can be done, that time can be reconciled, that Yahweh has given us a timeline. And I've said before that the begats, the children born, were that's our documentation. And so once again, Yahweh is also, he's keeping a record of even this time period. So in a time to come, all of that will be revealed. Let's go ahead and give Yahweh a praise. Hallelujah.